Welcome everyone to Heart Talk, coming to you live from Kota Kinabalu in Sabah in Malaysia. Thank you for your company. And as I said in the beginning, if you have not subscribed to this channel, I beg you to do so. Now, Heart Talk is about heart-to-heart conversations about real life issues that matter to the heart, matter to wealth, health, well-being, spiritual living, and most important of all, how to live the abundant life. Now, we're on a series called Vadis Malaysia, and I got that name from this book, which is called Capturing Hope. The Struggle Continues for a New Malaysia. And the author was my fourth and seventh Prime Minister, Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad. It's an excellent book, and I would really recommend that every Malaysian reads it because it's about the journey of this country that we love so much for the last 80 over years in the political arena. And so my guest today is the son of the author, and he is Dato Seri Utama Haji Mukhriz Mahathir. He's a veteran Malaysian politician and businessman himself, and can be best introduced in his own words as written on his Instagram, and I read, former Jeralun MP, Jitra Adun, never say die, fight for your right to, and within brackets, form a party, and if I'm allowed to add, with a purpose. This is a family in service to the nation for decades, and I do not know of any other that can equal this. So please join me to welcome Dato Seri Mukhriz Mahathir to Heart Talk. Welcome, Mukhriz.
Thank you for inviting me. How are you?
It's my pleasure, and thank you for, happy good afternoon, and it's a lunchtime conversation, but, let me start on a very light-headed and light mood. When I read your introduction in Instagram, I was amazed at this statement when you said, fight for your right to, within brackets, form A. So if I take out what's in the bracket, it means fight for your right to party. And I thought, no, I said, here's a man who has taken his whole life in the political scene, but he's telling us it's our right to party as well. It speaks volumes of who you are.
Yeah. I think that really should not be missed, that when we are politicking, we do that through parties. And then the other parties is something totally different.
That's right. And I thought, well, this is something that I wanted to bring up. But thank you once again for joining us on this series called Vadis Malaysia. I think it is very timely. In chapter 13 and page 277, Tun Dr. Mahathir made this statement in bold. And I think it's an important question that every Malaysian should ask, and that is, where am I going? And I want to just tell you that as a father yourself, sometimes we tell our children and ask our children, where are you going? Not to be inquisitive, but we hope they're going to a safe place and come back home safely. And I think it speaks volumes of that. So on that note, thank you for joining us. And I want to just start off with this. I'm okay to call you Mukhriz, right?
Yes, please do.
And 40 years of working as a doctor, as a plastic surgeon, 22 of those years, I had only one face as a prime minister, and that is Tun Dr. Mahathir. And nothing else mattered to me. I just followed the whole history of this country with him. And mirrors don't lie, and shadows never leave you. And so when he resigned in 2003, the mirror in it was you. And if I look at the shadow was still you. So you have been there, and I want you to just give us, all listeners, all those who have tuned in, a bit of an insight of growing up in a family where politics was the air that was your breathing. And yet, I'm not sure whether at the dining table, was it allowed to be talked about. So give us a feel of growing up, because today you're a veteran on the sides.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And it's a good question to start off with. Actually, I guess despite what people think, we were, of course, a political family, but then we hardly talk about politics at the dinner table. Why? Because I suppose my father did not really encourage that. He didn't want us to be involved actively in party politics or in politics in general. He was very cautious and very concerned about people accusing him of nepotism and the like. I think you might have heard that even some of his immediate family members don't speak to him until now because of perhaps asking for favors while he was prime minister and he could not fulfill them. So it didn't come so naturally, actually, for me and my brother to get involved in politics. The thing I find rather surprising, even for me and for people I tell this story to, is that the first day I attended Parliament as an MP, you would think that since I was the son of an MP myself for, I don't know, over 30 years, that I would know that building well. Yeah, but I didn't. My father never took us to Parliament while he was serving there. And I didn't even know where the entrance to the Dewan Rakyat was. I was looking around the hall. I literally had to ask an officer there, and she pointed out, okay, that's the door you have to enter. And that was the time that I could sit in as an MP. So it didn't come so naturally to us, actually. And I must say that we only started speaking to each other about politics. I'm talking about my father after he had retired the first time. So that was when and he was kosher by then, to bring that up.
And so you all were blocked in doing things. And talk to us about the time when you had that football jersey. I thought that was because many would think. I mean, like all my three children are doctors, right? And I never forced them to. In fact, I wanted to take them to the postmortems and see so that they will run away from dead bodies, But yeah.
I remember. My father was at the time the UMNO division chief for Kubang Pasu. I think he was holding that position for over 35 years, 22 years as president of the party. So the division UMNO youth chief invited me, I was just a regular member, invited me to hand over football jerseys to his members. So I innocently accepted that invitation, went there. I didn't pay for anything. He paid for everything, and I just stood there and handed over jerseys. So when it came time for the division meeting, my father asked all the heads to report, what kind of activities they conducted and all that. And the youth chief, again, innocently reported that he had invited me to come over to just hand over jerseys. And suddenly my father blew up and said that, who you the right? What was in your mind when you invited my son, who's got no position in the party, to be involved in division matters? So I guess the message was very clear that despite him being president of the party, he did not want to be seen, giving any favors, making it easy, opening the way for his family members, including my brother Mozani and myself.
Yeah, well, it speaks volumes, isn't it? Because what happens behind the curtains, nobody knows. And so I think this is one thing that we're going to learn a lot about, at least in this conversation with you. Now, I titled this whole conversation as "Why Do We Need a Government at This Important Time?" And I took that from your wonderful message and speech that you gave to the people in Kedah. And so, Mukhriz, the country is going through crossroads, not about what they are facing, but crossroads within itself.
Yeah.
And we always talk about the future that is uncertain, but a lot of those uncertainties are man-made. It's not
Yeah.
about knowing some hurricane that is coming and we're all getting prepared for it, which we can't control. So when Tun resigned in 2003, you were about 39 years old. And so before that, you were in the corporate world. I mean, you're a businessman. I remember when I did my conversation with Tun, I told him he was a businessman when you're selling goreng pisang. And so business is in his blood. But looking through the lens of a corporate businessman, obviously you would choose the best of the best in order to make sure that the company does well. Today's government that we have today, I mean, what are your thoughts about what is good governance and what should a good government be? I mean, I want your thoughts about that.
Well, generally speaking, if we understand the definition of a government, is a system that governs the society, or the nation, and for that system to work and to be of service to the people, it needs to have certain laws in place, certain ways of doing things, good ethics, and the like. Of course, it needs support from the people. I mean, that works out for us who practice democracy. But it is still a man-made system. And because of that, it is subject to all kinds of challenges, including here in Malaysia. We have all kinds of countries practicing democracy, including India, even the US, Indonesia, Malaysia, many other countries. But all of us have different variations of the system. And the one that we practice here, I find, is not quite perfect. I mean, of course, no system is perfect. I mean, but at least we strive towards getting perfection that suits our mold here. So I think that it is not being of proper service to the people right now. Government also is the problem, not the solution. Perhaps we need to look at the system itself to see whether we can tweak it here and there to improve, to make sure that it benefits the people. One of the things that I find very obvious is that governments of these days have a very short point of view. It's just a 5-year term. Everyone thinks about what we need to do within 5 years and how do we continue serving after 5 years. So there is no real thought about long-term benefits of for the country. If we remember, during my father's time, there was Vision 2020. That was a 30-year plan. The Look East policy was also 30 years. Before that, during the time of Tun Razak, it was also a 30-year policy, which is the new economic policy. And then, but we have we've not heard of any new plans that will last 30 years. So I think government after government, especially after the 2018 elections, we've had several different new prime ministers coming in and out, and the planning has been really short term, and I think that actually hurts the country.
Definitely, and the other thing that, I mean, I'm a visionary myself as the founder of 2 Asia Pacific consultations. I think the most important thing that's missing are visionary leaders, leaders with vision, because like you just mentioned, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. And when you have a very impatient population that wants to see results short term, they miss the long-term journey of importance of being committed to that long-term goal, isn't that? I mean, isn't that the main issue?
The process of nation building takes time.
Absolutely.
So the country or even the state, I was MB for Kedah twice, although I didn't finish my terms. But all of us get onto some learning curve. And in the hopes that it will curve up. Growth will be exponential at some point, some inflection point. But the thing is, you need to get on that curve. So, and hopefully different governments, whether it is from the same party, different parties, will continue moving along the same curve. The moment you try to undo what good was done by your predecessor and then go back to starting from zero, we've basically lost out in time and in effort. And there's really no sense in that. All you need to do is learn from past mistakes, improve on the good ones, and maybe come up with your own ideas. But unfortunately, because of politics, and politics in Malaysia, I feel has come to a rather toxic level, we try to outdo each other. And I think the country and the rakyat suffers from this.
Absolutely. Point taken. And Mukhriz, I'm a doctor and I'm trained to see disease.
Right.
And so that's my focus. In fact, we are very, our mindset is so limited that we work within a closed loop. And I never, and many of, I'm sure doctors, we're just concerned going to work, treating the sick, coming home and doing service. And I've served Sabah now for what, nearly 40 years, 35, 40 years. Now, when you talk about the economic emancipation of a people and a nation, there's a price to pay. And I talk always about, the two credits that come from that, and that is you need ethics and you need morality in order for that emancipation journey to take place. But there are also two-faced monsters that come out of it during that transition, and that is poverty and corruption.
Sure.
And I want to take you to poverty, because when I hear you talking from the rostrum, poverty seems to be inside of you as a core calling, that your heart is for those who are poor. And many people forget to see that because they see the richness of where the environment is or who the person is, but they forget the call sign. So talk to me about Kedah and so many nations, so many states. I want your views on this, because poverty is the main struggle of every country. And if the government is not focused on that, and you are, then how does that come in your whole party philosophy, policy, and move?
Well, as a doctor, you would know that you would look first at the symptoms.
Yeah.
But then you don't treat symptoms. You treat the cause of the symptoms, right?
Right.
I mean, so when you diagnose, you need to diagnose accurately, and then you prescribe most effectively, right? Whether it's treatment, whether it's surgery, whether it's medication and the like, right? So it's the same with governance, I would think. If we misdiagnose, if we only look at only symptoms and try to deal with that, you don't solve the root problems. So we look at poverty as something that is a symptom. And we need to understand, why is this recurring? We've been independent for many, many years now, and yet it is still an ongoing problem. So in the case of Kedah, for example, we are known as the rice bowl of the country. It is not a bad thing per se. I mean, if you think about food security and things like that, you understand how important Kedah would be to make sure that it feeds the nation.
Absolutely.
Right. So why is Kedah still poor? It is the second poorest state in the country, and you would think that if 70% of the population is directly or indirectly related to the cultivation of paddy, of rice, then why aren't these people benefiting from it? Is 270,000 hectares of land that are either dams, lakes, water catchment areas, the forests, rivers, and the paddy field, that take up the whole effort to produce enough food for our people, that if you think you could just take 10% of that away and change that into an industrial park, maybe the state would be richer, but we understand, Kedahans understand that this is for the nation, and we sacrifice that large tract of land for that purpose. But surely Kedah needs to be compensated adequately, so that while it is fulfilling its responsibility as the rice bowl of the nation, that poverty in Kedah is addressed properly. And I think that is the role of governments. And unfortunately, I must say, the federal government has, closed one eye or something towards Kedah for far too long. When I was Menteri Besar, I brought this matter up numerous times in meetings with the Prime Minister, with the Cabinet, in official letters, begging them to pay attention to the plights of Kedahans. And unfortunately, it fell on deaf ears. So we do have a problem between federal and state governments, even when they are from the same ruling party. This idea of federalism is something that we adopt and we accept, but surely federal government can give special attention to those states that are needing help, like Kedah, like the poorer states.
No, I mean, point taken, and I feel your heart, because it's such a real issue. Because, in our scriptures, we have a man named Joseph, who left and went to Egypt, and and he kept all the barns full of all the harvest ready. And when his own nation went into famine and starvation, he is the one who supplied all the needs for the people.
Exactly.
And I want to bring in, and I promise you that I'm going to introduce you to this Japanese folklore.
Okay.
And so just bear with me for a few moments. There was a young lad, about 7 to 8 years old. And I'm saying this with you in my mind. And he was skipping along the cliffs of Japan. And as he was going early morning, 5 o'clock, he was going to school, Mukhriz. And he looked down, and all the paddy fields were there, and the villages were in the valleys and all that. And then as he had his knapsack and all that, and then he looked to the right, to the ocean, and far away, he saw a tsunami.
Okay.
So he got panicked. He said, now, here's a tsunami coming. He looked on the left, he saw his people, his family and all that, they're going to be wiped out. Now, what does a 5 to 7-year-old boy do? He was thinking. You know what he did, Mukhriz? He set fire to the rice fields. And so when the rice fields went on fire, the villagers woke up, saw their bread and butter being burnt. They ran up to put the fire out. And then they reached the cliff, they saw the tsunami and went for cover. And I think that's a fantastic lesson. It's not about the waves that are coming, because every wave that comes will go back to the ocean. Every wave recedes. But what we are really aware of are the tsunamis. In fact, that's why I congratulate your father, Tun Dr. Mahathir, because in 1981-82, Look East policy, he turned the country into industrialization. Why? Because the tsunami was coming in 1997. The Asian tigers were at a crisis. So talk to us, because we can learn from you, and we can learn from Kedah, that even though it's a paddy field kind of a say in supporting the rice bowl of the nation, but the Taman Technology Tinggi in Kulim, which turned into a high industry technology center, is preparing for the tsunami that's coming. There's no such thing as they cannot turn something that they can't see until they are taught. Your thoughts on that? It's a brilliant, illustration.
Well, before the advent of Kulim High Tech Park, no one thought that Kedah could embark in high-tech industrialization. Everyone thought that this state will remain an agrarian state, that it will stay like that forever. So it took a bit of risk-taking, I would suppose, by the government at the time to to try out building an industrial park, high-tech industrial park in Kulim, spend 600 million on buying the land, developing the infrastructure and the like, and promoting it to investors, including foreign investors. But clearly, it's been now many, many years since it first started. We have proven that Kedah can do it successfully. 31 billion ringgit invested in just that park alone. 26,000 jobs. Average salary is about 5,600 ringgit. 80% of the workers there are Kedahans. And I think it contributes considerably to the national GDP. So it just proves that once you set your mind to it, you could change the situation of a state, but you must have the political will to do it.
Absolutely.
And of course, one of the key ingredients would be education. If we didn't have the right type of education to make sure that all those employments all those jobs that are offered by Kulim High-Tech Park are filled by locals, not just Kedahans, but locals, Malaysians, then it would not have succeeded. So I think more of that needs to happen. A bit of political will just to push through, not take things for granted, not having to just keep to the old ways and say that, well, paddy is all that Kedah does, and for forever it'll be stuck with that. But try and look at some of the strengths that each state has. So right now, I would happily report that both Kedah and Penang constitutes an ecosystem for the electronic and electrical sector of industry. So if a company like Infineon, German semiconductor company, or say First Solar from the US, looks at Kulim High-Tech Park and considers investing billions there, they would rest assured that they would easily get the right number of qualified people to work there. The infrastructure would be in place, and the support system is also in place for them to continue with their industry. So I think that kind of planning needs to happen and implemented correctly.
Now, I want to take you back to, we talked about the new economic policy and 1971. A lot of people kind of like want to look beyond that, in front of it but they forget why it was caused, and what came out of it. And I always talk about fault lines. And you come across to me as someone who's on the cutting edge of politics. You think very deeply about what's best for the state and for the nation. But when fault lines come up, as a doctor, as we started earlier on, we talked about, I said, poverty and corruption. And Mukhriz, every time we go for surgery, we have to fill up a form. And in that form is a small section that says date of onset of the disease. And I got to go and find out, when did this start? And sometimes we don't know, especially if it's some tumor or something growing, we don't know. But if I think of poverty and corruption, I think of the date of onset would be when the country changed from an agricultural base into transposing it into an industrialized dynamism, and the whole thing is moving. And because of these fault lines between different races, that how they can cope up with it, after 1981 would be, for me, the real birth and onset of deep poverty and corruption, because there would have been certain areas in that fault line that could not cope with the speed of transformation and industrialization. And so the rich got richer and the poor got poorer. And as people get poorer, obviously the only other shortcut is corruption, you see. So to me, it's a disease. And today we talk about gangrene and, the way it's gone out of our hand. It's because that was the reason why today, and I really salute Tun, because in October of 2019, he came up with this shared prosperity vision again for 2030, in order to bring about some kind of sharing of economic inequality. Now, talk to us about that, because that's very key. That could be the next tsunami coming in, not from outside, but from within.
Right. Well, if I can say that, I'm not so sure whether the onset of our decline started the moment we went into industrialization, because that was like a natural progression. We had to move into something that is going to provide us better than agriculture. But you're right in that it creates more opportunities for wrongdoings. So it was not just the industrialization, but it needed to be complemented with activities that strengthens your inner self, your inner strength. The Malays use the word jati diri, So I think we tried to do that as well, to make sure that, okay, this is the path that we're going. It is a good path, but not without challenges and not without its temptations, So what do we do about that so that we are on the right path, but we don't veer away? We stay with the straight and narrow. So I can't say that we were so successful in making sure that we stick to the straight and narrow, because as we know now, corruption has become somewhat rampant. And not only that, leaders who we had full trust in basically proved to be untrustworthy, and they set a very, very bad example. And this is something that cannot be forgiven, because the implications, the impact is basically vast. It becomes culture, and it's very difficult once it becomes a norm. So, for example, how do we address the fact that I think all of us say that we are anti-corruption? We will fight tooth and nail against corruption. But the moment there is an election, if a politician hands out 200 ringgit, 250 ringgit, we will gladly take it. And we'll justify it by saying that, well, it's only a few hundred ringgit. What does that matter? Not really understanding that in order for us to right the wrong, we too play an important role. It is partly our responsibility. If we shirk out that responsibility, then we have only ourselves to blame, because in the end we'll have a leader who is basically not to our liking. So I think this crisis after crisis that we face needs to be looked at very seriously. And for example, even like a agricultural state like Kedah, you don't need to explain to Kedahans what climate change is, because we see it every day. You go into the paddy field, and for example, last year we missed our dry season. Can you imagine? Yeah. So the dry season is crucial because it happens in between two seasons. You see, that's the one that demarcates between season 1 and season 2 in a year. So when that happens, it continues with wet season throughout the year, and paddy doesn't grow that way. But if we also continue doing the same thing as we normally do, not taking into consideration the change in climate, nothing's going to work. So in the second season, we have our paddy harvesters going into the paddy fields and sinking because the soil was just too soft. You see, so So this is a serious problem. I mean, that's why I said there is no amount of scientific explanation that you need to do with Kedahans, because they understand it daily. They see it, they experience it, so something needs to be done about that.
No, this is, and this is why the country can learn from each state, because each state has got endemic problems that come towards the whole GDP of a whole country. In fact, I always talk about, my doctors, when they are following me, I said, each one of you are a GDP, walking GDP. And that is growth, development, and prosperity. Each of us are markers of that. And thank you for that. So when you look back at Kedah, after I've read so much about you and did my studies on you, I think that, Kedah needs you urgently, man.
Yeah. Yeah, I think 2 stints was enough.
Is that right? No, but I think taking it to a different level. In the sense of because not many. You learn through experience. So those are the 2 twin monsters I talk about, twin face monsters that come out from economic emancipation. And what my personal feeling as a doctor is that when I talk to people, and because I was 17 years old during May 13, 1969, and people don't want to talk about it, but to me, as a doctor, if that area and time is not healed, whatever you do, you're just camouflaging what is, people are walking over it. And because we've got a generation that's coming up called Generation Z. And they have, I tell you, I'm going to end up with one of the girls that I just saw on TikTok this morning, which fired me up, because these are the people, and I'm sure even with you and your children, they are the next movement of this country. And they need all the support that we can. So tell me, as we move on, you talked about democracy. And this is very fervent in your DNA, that even though it is a very human institution, it can be abused. But we are thankful that we have a constitutional monarchy, we have a Westminster system of democracy, which offers the best opportunity of sovereignty in the hands of the people. Is democracy still alive in this nation?
Yeah. First of all, I want to address your point about history.
Okay.
A lot of people, particularly young people, maybe they don't understand the need to understand and learn from our past. But if I can use the analogy of an athletics event, the long jump. Okay, so in the long jump, you don't stand at the line and then jump.
Right.
What do you do?
Right. All right.
You are at least 200 meters away.
Absolutely.
You run, you gain momentum. You have the right direction. You have the right. You set your course so that your foot, the last one that hits the ground, is just on or just before the line. You cannot cross the line, right? So then that momentum pushes you forward, and then you end up with a good long jump. See, that's history. If you didn't have that momentum, that 200-meter run up before you hit the line, you wouldn't have gotten that kind of distance, which is the future. See, so if we can get young people to understand this, you learn from your past. It may be a very bad past. 13 May 1969 was a very tragic, bloody, part of our history. But it is very important to learn from that, to understand why it happened, what did we do to mitigate that, and what policies were put in place so that it didn't reoccur. The point I was making was that we learn from it, and definitely the late Tun Razak put in place a lot of policies, new ideas in order to address that, those racial divides, the widening disparity, so that we could come together and build this nation together. See, so that's one point. Democracy again is the system that we chose for ourselves. I think it's a system that we're stuck with. I mean, not in a bad way, but I mean, we need to keep building on it, improving on it. It is man-made, as I said before. But I can't help but compare it with other systems that have seemingly proven to be successful in eradicating poverty, for example, pushing a nation into development and progress. And one of them being China, of course. I can't help but being envious of their policies, their system in eradicating poverty for 80 million people, just like that. I mean, how do you do that? I mean, I think that is a feat that has never been achieved by any nation in the world. And they've done it, they've proven it. And it's not with neglecting agriculture, but also with getting into industries. Education, of course, plays an extremely important part. But the gumption, the vision, the strategy, the implementation, the decision making was all right, to me. So I'm not saying that democracy can't do it. That we can do it, but then we should not over politicize things. Right now, everything is politics, Charles.
Absolutely.
I mean, education is politics. Even who paid the debt of Felda is politics. I mean, it's getting to the point of being ridiculous. Actually, if you look at the news on the front pages of our papers and what's on the news on TV, I think the first three main news items, have little to do with the livelihood of our people. I mean, we talk about certain politicians maybe saying something that is very sensitive. Certain parts of society got very upset with it, and then police reports were made, and then investigations were conducted and all that. It's got absolutely zero relevance to the people. The people are thinking about putting food on the table, making ends meet, acting a decent living, putting a roof over our heads, making sure that our children have got jobs, that they're getting educated properly, that we are able to attract FDIs or DDIs in the country, and at the same time keeping the fabric of society intact. So our relations between races, all that. Those are the important things. So why are we constantly distracted with all this nonsense? And I think the media, of course, has a role, including social media. That one's a real monster that's difficult to get a grip on. But I think politicians hold much of the responsibility from both sides of the fence. So government and the opposition needs to kind of cool down. I know that we have too many elections going on. I mean, whether it's a by-election, general elections, now it's state elections, it is continuous. It's never ending. While we learn from history, but we need to chart a new course for the future. And I can't help but notice our neighbors, Indonesia, the Philippines, Thailand most recently, they vote in parties that perhaps didn't exist 5-10 years ago, and they are very direct. They have names like the Future Party, Moving Forward Party. I mean, they're just looking forward. I don't think it means that they forget what was in the past, but at least they're charting a new course of respective nations, and I think we need to do that here as well. And this is the reason my own party feel that we won't have anything to do with these coming state elections. We want to take a bit of time to rebuild ourselves, attract young people, teach them about politics, teach them about leadership. I mean, you're extremely good at that. And then let's think about what kind of government do we want? What kind of leaders do we want? Whether it is the Prime Minister, the Menteri Besar, the Chief Ministers, and the like.
Yeah. No, I mean, I hope the whole nation hears what you're saying, because as I said, as a doctor, it all comes back to fault lines. And if you talk about earthquakes and all those countries that are along earthquake fault lines, they're always aware when the next earthquake is coming. And if you look at the fault lines of our country, it's so fractured that even an urban city can have urban poor and rural poor. And those are fault lines, you know. And I was telling Tun the other day on our conversation, I said, you know, in medical field, we have what's called a PET scan, Mukhriz.
Okay. Right.
And this PET scan, you know, has got the radioisotopes, you know, we call tracers, radioactive.
Right.
And it can pick up hotspots when there's disease all over the body. You put the body into a chamber, you go into a chamber, and it can pick up hotspots. And if we can take even just one locality, for example, and then find out where are the hotspots of poverty, and then deal with that as it is, I tell you, you'll have such a richness of overflow because they are focused, you see. So there's much to do, and I want to end now our conversation on the 3 R's.
Okay.
And the first R is reconciliation. And I think you talked about it, that we go back and get them to understand 1969 is, you know, in America, they call it post 9/11. In this country, we should call it post 1969. And there should be a national reconciliation day so that we are thankful of our freedom and the ability to live peacefully. That's number one. The second R I was talking about is rehabilitation. And that is when you bring people out of poverty, make sure they don't go back to poverty. You see, you know, there's always this thing about handouts and all that kind of stuff. But how do you rehabilitate a people? You know, not everybody can run long jumps. And if they've still got crutches on, they'll still be at the back. And so we need to appreciate that there are segments of people, of races, who are still on crutches or still need help. And we need to share that responsibility, that there's enough of richness and wealth that we can do that. And the third R, which I talk about as a plastic surgeon, is rejuvenation. And bringing out the resplendence of the people. You know, I've been in Sabah for 35 years, Mukhriz. And when I first came, it was a culture shock because I didn't know how to handle it. Because orang Sabah sini, orang bukan Sabah sana, you know. And I was standing at the airport, and I was saying, hey, I thought I was a Malaysian, you know, what the heck is going on, you know? But I loved every moment of it because it was a beautiful place, you know, to smile is so natural. The people are so beautiful. And so it's all about mindset. And I believe the battle of the 21st century, correct me if I'm wrong, the battle of the 21st century is the battle of the mind.
Right.
Because with the media that is coming out, it's the mind that is going to become toxic because there are silos all over the place and feeding disinformation and resulting in dysfunctional people with no proper mindset. You know, your thoughts on these 3 R's? I mean, I think these are more important than any other 3 R that we are talking about today.
Exactly. And we are allowed to talk about these 3 R's, right? The way I see it is like this. Before a leader can try and effect change with his policies, he needs to understand first the acceptability of that change among the people. So in the early years after Merdeka, the policy at the time was somewhat laissez-faire, you know. So it's a non-interference. It's just let's try to grow the economy generally, in the hopes that there'll be some trickling down effect that even the poor will benefit. So after 13 May, Tun Razak decided that we had to do away with that laissez-faire policy. We had to be more interventionist. So the government of that time basically came up with policies that addressed issues very directly. How do we handle disparity? how do we kill poverty, in the bud, and all that, So we have to look back now. What is the state of our people? Can they take very direct intervention, or should it just be a very general, let's basically enrich the whole nation in the hopes that somehow the poor will benefit from it? I think the solution will be somewhere in between.
Right.
So the country might not be able to withstand very direct, very harsh, very hard interventionist type of policy. We need to kind of cajole the people into accepting the fact that the government should not be coming up with just populist policies. There needs to be some hard decisions to be made, which means that all of us will have to tighten up our belts, government especially. So, and in the hopes that with this, in the long run, the country will be back on track and grow. And then in between, there should be also policies, although not too harsh, to try and bring our people back together again. You see, if I may, the Malays have certain fears. The other races also have certain fears. So how do we address these fears? And it should not be a zero-sum game, obviously. Make all of us understand, that, okay, that is what you are afraid of, and this is what I'm afraid of. Let's try and combine minds, put our minds together and address these things. So in the end, we come up with a collective decision that is good for the nation in the long run, and our young people will feel that, okay, this is their nation that they will inherit, and that they won't go anywhere else and leave us. So that's my hope, really, and I hope to play a role in that, and I hope you too will play a role, and all of us actually should take that responsibility for the good of our nation.
Powerful. Back to the future. It's like in the movie. Well said. I mean, I feel you, and Malaysia needs you, I tell you honestly, because we need to put all the baggage of all that rubbish talk that's on the market and bring the real soul of a nation into existence. So on that note, I want to thank you. Thank you, Mukhriz, for joining me on HEARTtalk. Thank you
for inviting.
I tell you, I've learned so much, and I hope everybody else has got a better idea of the man himself. And please, this is from me to you. This country needs you. And during this time, I hope that you will write your next book so that I'll have 3 books with me. And, you have a wonderful family. And I was telling Tun, I will be having another conversation when he turns 100.
Nice.
So that's the visionary to another visionary, that we never give up looking forward. So on behalf of all of us, and Mary and Heidi and here, thank you. And best wishes to you and your family. Hi everyone, this is Dr. Charles Lee. Before this episode starts, I have a small favor to ask from you. Many visit and watch the videos, and they find it very informative. They get excited. Some of them write to me on my email, but they don't subscribe. So would you do me a small favor? Would you just press that subscribe button? It'll be so good for all of us. Certainly it helps the channel grow. It adds a little bit of vitality to the channel. At the same time, the numbers get bigger, and my heart gets bigger too. So just to know that you're with me, you enjoy the company, and I enjoy your company, you won't believe it. So please subscribe, press that button. I want to hear those bells jingle, and most of all, stay tuned, and I love your company. We'll talk again.